If I took all that I got and spread it out on this table, it might not seem like a lot. A once glimmering joy slowly fading from view. All the change in my pocket's not enough in this picture of you. Still I've heard all that I have in a moment is hardly a sign of everything coming my way. I believe when I need it, it will be mine. So let's take this slowly. All I need is coming.
Hello and welcome to the Goldberry Artisans Podcast. This is a podcast all about my love of knitting and my journey to learn more about knitting and wool. And I'm coming to you from the beautiful state of Maine. Oh, my name is Emily, and I am a college student who just loves yarn. So, welcome to the podcast. For any new viewers, thank you for all of those who have put up with me not uploading for like a month and a half. Thank you for those of you who reached out and sent me messages, let me know that you missed the podcast, which was really encouraging, even though I was not able to record. My goal was during the school year to record one episode a month, but February I lost February in all ways. It just went way too fast. So here I am on a snow day. I didn't have to go to work today, and I'm on spring break from school. So I was able to sit down and podcast. It is quite snowy, and it's not very bright, so I have some lamps on either side of me. Hopefully will help to show off colors as well as natural lighting. I am excited for when it will be warm enough to podcast outside again. So today I am going to be talking about what I have off the needles, which is a lot because it's been a long time since I last talked to you. So what I have off the needles, currently on the needles, as well as some looking for advice on a sweater plan and just a short list of things that are making me happy. I have my computer over here pulled up with all of my Ravelry project pages, so hopefully I can remember all the details, even though some of these projects have been a long time in the making, or it's been a while since I finished them. First up is finally halfway through last month I finally completed my Frozen Mystery shawl, which was for the Frozen Mystery Knit Along hosted by Lily of Nordic Stitches in the month of December. I've kind of, while I was working on this, I kind of dubbed this my Reese's Peanut Butter Cup shawl because the colors just, I think I was eating a Reese's one time while working on this. The colors just remind me of a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. So I knit this using Knit Picks palette. I do not know all the colorway names, but it actually matches the sweater I'm wearing today. I used the leftovers to make this shawl. I did have to make some changes. I was running out of yarn. I knew I would not have enough of the light brown to do all of the panels of this with this second color. And so I knit the first panel in that color. The second panel, I kind of put this reddish coppery brown in the middle, because it's like eyelets, seed stitch pattern, and then eyelets. But then for the last section, I was running out of even that colored yarn, and I had another even lighter brown, but I didn't really want to introduce it in the third panel, especially not at the end of it. So I did the eyelets, and then I did just a few rows of the seed stitch pattern, and you were supposed to do more seed stitch and another eyelet section before binding off. I did not do that. I did not do the second eyelet section. And even the first one I modified, I didn't have rest rows between like you typically do for an eyelids. You know, you go across one row, you do like a knit two together yarn over, then you purl back. I did not. So, just to maximize yarn usage. But it is still a nice big comfy shawl, even without those extra couple of rows. And this is how I normally wear my shawls. Here, let me get up so you can see it a little bit. Oh. This is how I normally wear shawls. I find it keeps me nice and warm. I don't normally have to fuss with it as long as they're big enough. So you can see it does perfectly match. So yeah, I really like it. It's nice and big, which is what I like when I'm knitting shawls. It is not blocked, so it may grow a bit. Probably not a lot. Knit Picks palette from what the projects I've made with it hasn't grown a ton while blocking. So yeah, it's unblocked. I did weave in all the ends, but I tend to weave in the ends and then block, then clip the ends, just because that way the yarn ends can get all situated. When it's blocked, they might move around a little bit, and then I can clip them. So they're all woven in, it's just not blocked yet. So yeah, that is my shawl. I really like working with Knit Picks palette. It's a super affordable yarn, and I believe, let me double check, I think it is just 100% wool, non-superwash. But I find it enjoyable to work with, and even on this sweater there's very minimal pilling, a little bit underneath, you know, where you would expect it, like underneath the arms, like a very small amount, but not a lot, and very easy to just pull them off. Sorry, am I in focus? I don't think I am. There we go. Sorry. The lens that I use for recording is it's a 50mm, and so it's sitting like 3.5 feet away from me. So it's a little hard to tell when I'm in focus or not. Anyway, I did really enjoy working on this. It just came at a time when I could not work in anything complicated. So it took me longer to get through the lace section because I had limited time to work on it. And I also had less time to work on it because I was working on a test knit, and as with most test knits, it did have a deadline. So it was really once I got done my sweater test knit that I could spend time working on that shawl. So this pattern is not yet released for the test knit. I was knitting this for Annie of This Bird Knits. I believe that's her design name on Ravelry. On Instagram, she's this_bird_knits. She's released some really beautiful sweater patterns lately. She's released several over the past, I'd say, month or so, and they're beautiful. And all different weights as well, and they all look different, which is really cool. But this pattern, as far as I know, it doesn't have a name quite yet. It is a cardigan, open front, doesn't have buttons or buttonholes or anything, made to wear open, with 3/4 length set-in sleeves, knit in a heavy waistline, knit in Yarn on the House Mother, which is a heavy lace weight base, and it's 100% Rambouillet wool. I talked a lot more about Rambouillet wool in my previous episode. And I really loved working on this. It has a simple stitch pattern, but I don't tend to go for just straight vanilla projects of just all knitting. I get bored with those. Even when I want mindless knitting, I get bored with those. Even in socks sometimes. I can only do a vanilla sock every once in a while. So this was an engaging stitch pattern while still being mindless. And I finally have a cardigan that I can wear indoors all day, no matter where I am. Because I have a few worsted weight pullovers that I love, but I cannot really wear them to class because most of the rooms that I have this semester in school and last semester too are just really warm. So I cannot wear a worsted weight sweater, cardigan, or pullover. I don't have any worsted weight cardigans, but I couldn't do it. So, and even this as a fingering weight pullover is a bit much for some of those rooms. But because this is a cardigan and it's very open in the front, so that lets a lot of air go through, and it's only 3/4 length sleeves. It's a heavy lace weight yarn, so it's nice and light. I can wear it inside just about everywhere. Even a friend's house that I generally find to be very warm, I've worn this sweater there a few times. And the colorway is the shiitake colorway. And when I first chose this color looking at the website, and I really liked it. But then I started knitting with it, and I wasn't totally sure, because if you put it next to something brown, it's not a true brown. It's kind of a gray brown. And so while I was knitting it, I was a little bit concerned, well, this won't really go with my clothes that are brown, but I don't know if I can wear it with something that's black or gray. But it turns out that I have a lot of clothing that matches this color. I have a top that I wore with it a few weeks ago, a floral top that matched perfectly. I have a skirt that has like this exact color and some floral designs on it. It matches my wardrobe perfectly. So I'm glad that I went with this colorway. And I did knit this in the 41, I think it was the 41 3/4 inch bust size. And I am a 38 bust, but I tend to knit sweaters a little bigger just because I like to have more positive ease. But if I were to, and I love how it fits, I love how the body of it fits, but if I were to knit this again, I would knit the sleeves slightly smaller because the sleeves are quite big. So I would knit the sleeves in a smaller size, which is what I did for my stonecutter pullover. It's a big cabled worsted weight pullover, but I knit the sleeves in a smaller size than I did the body. And I didn't do any adjustments to the sleeve cap, and it fit just fine. So, yeah, I would knit the sleeves slightly smaller. So yeah, I just really love this pattern, and I will definitely keep you updated and let you know when it is released. Oh, and something else that I liked about this that made it more mindless is there are no decreases or increases for either the waist or the bust. So it's straight up and down, which makes it a nice, open, loose, casual sweater. But if you're someone who prefers more fitted and more shape, a more fitted design or more shape in it, then with this stitch pattern you could easily add increases or decreases if you wanted. But it is so incredibly comfortable, and I just love it to pieces. I've worn it. Sometimes I have to keep myself from wearing it because I want to wear it to church like every week, because my church building tends to be pretty warm. So that this is one of the only sweaters I can wear in there, but I have to remind myself that I can't wear it every single week. So that was my test knit that I kept alluding to for This Bird Knits. Alright, I have a few smaller finished objects. And all of these are unblocked because I wasn't sure when I would be able to podcast, so I didn't want to have things soaking wet on the blocking mats when I finally had time. Except for this sweater, I did block all the pieces individually before seaming. I have not blocked it since it's been seamed. But anyway, next up is, I dubbed this my Violet Vale hat after I was reading Anne of Green Gables, and Anne and Diana have this one patch of woods that they call Violet Vale because of all the beautiful violets that grow there. And the pattern is Patsy by Courtney Kelly. It's part of a Kelborn Woolens collection that launched to celebrate their new yarn, which is a sport weight yarn. And I've had this skein of yarn sitting in my stash for a while. Only one skein, so I thought it would be perfect for a hat. This is Quince & Co. Chickadee, which is their sport weight base in the Frank's Plum colorway. I bought this at Knitwit in Portland. And then for the color work, I actually used Quince & Co. Finch, which is their fingering weight base. Because I had some scraps. I don't know all their colorway names because some of them I got in like a D-Stash bundle on Instagram. And I picked it up because I love Quince & Co. Some of them, I think there was one that was a full skein. And I knew that I wanted to use Quince & Co. in color work, and I knew that I would use it. This blue, I do know, this is the Delft colorway. I used it for a pair of socks that I haven't worn yet because I haven't decided if I'm going to keep them or gift them. Sometimes I do that with socks. I'll just knit them and stash them away. And if I need a quick gift for somebody, I will pull them out and give them away. So that colorway is Delft. I think this light pale pink, I think it's clay, but I'm not totally sure. So I haven't blocked it yet. So I don't know how it will work with being fingering weight and sport weight together. But if you, it doesn't seem to be pulling in at all, really. So I'm hoping that when it blocks, it will be okay. And I'm not worried about it being too airy, I guess, being too thin right here because it is color work, so you've got all the floats running behind it. And again, the ends are woven in, but not clipped because I have not blocked it yet. So there are the floats. Some of them you can see are rather large. So some of the floats are rather large, but once it's blocked, I think those will kind of even out. So that is my Violet Vale hat. I just love Quince & Co. And I love how this hat fits. I tend to have issues with hats being too tight and just sliding off my head and pulling my hair up. But this one fits really nicely. Not too slouchy. Sometimes I like slightly more slouchy hats, but sometimes I just want a close fitting one without being too tight and falling off my head. So this one, I just really like how it fits. Alright, my basket is just absolutely overflowing. I guess I'll talk about my other hat FO next. Let me find my Ravelry page. Alright, so there is a pattern that I have had a crush on ever since it came out. It's the Cable Lines hat by Leela Robb? I don't know how to say her last name. I'm sorry. And it came out in one of the issues of making number 4, which was Lines. And it is a beautiful hat. I've been wanting to make it ever since it came out. Now the sample was knit in Quince & Co., which meant that the cables really popped. But I had this skein of yarn that I've been wanting to use for this hat. But I named this my Small Acts of Kindness and Love hat, inspired by a quote by Gandalf in The Hobbit, which states, "I have found that it is the small everyday deed of ordinary folks that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love," which I just feel like is an absolutely perfect quote. So, and Gandalf the gray hat, couldn't help myself. And this was knit. I know this is not the best yarn for hats, but it's so soft, it feels like I'm wearing a cloud. The yarn is it's yarn local to me. I picked it up at a craft fair from Falling Star Farm. As far as I can find, they don't sell yarn online. They are on Instagram. And I'm assuming it's 100% alpaca. The label on the yarn did not say. I know it's hand spun. I don't know exactly the fiber content, but they have alpacas. I don't believe they have sheep. So unless they got wool from somebody else, I believe it is 100% alpaca. Which I know has a lot of drape, but does not hold structure as well as wool. But this hat is just so perfect. So again, a nice close-fitting hat. It really is like wearing a cloud. I love it. And so even if it does stretch out a little bit, that's okay because it's like, so it might be a little slouchy. That's okay. But I love this hat so much. And I really loved working the pattern. I knit this in like 2 days. So I love it. Hopefully I get to wear it a little bit more. Probably will, because Maine in March means big snowstorms. 2 in the past week. So I will get to wear this some more. My next finished object I don't actually have with me because my sister is currently wearing them. But I knit my little 9-year-old sister a pair of socks out of West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply in their, I believe this is the Blue Tit colorway from their bird line. I talked about them in my last episode. I just did some cuff down vanilla socks. I did an afterthought heel, which was not placed. I tried to place it. I tried to follow some directions, but I've never knit an afterthought heel before. I wanted to do it so that it would not interrupt the striping pattern, but the heels kind of falls down a little bit below where her heel is, so I'll have to make her another pair of socks sometime to make up for it. But she wears them. She's wearing them right now, so I didn't really want to rob them from her to record. So yeah, nothing super complicated. I also knit another pair of socks for my 7-year-old sister, because, I couldn't very well knit one sister pair of socks and not the other one. And she has worn these a few times, so there's a little bit of hair on them. But these are the Yorkville socks by Knitting Expat Designs, and I'm using some unlabeled sock yarn from my stash. I had used part of the skein for something else, and so I had just barely enough yarn to finish these. But it's nice and soft. I think it might be a Barocco socks, but I'm not 100% sure. I did not match up the stripes, but they're kind of vague stripes, if that makes any sense. It almost remind me like of watercolors. It just kind of blends from one to the next. It's not nearly as a striping pattern as like the West Yorkshire Spinners. So these were knit cuff down. I did a tubular 1x1 rib cast on, which is my favorite cast on for socks and anything that has a 1x1 rib. But I just sort of rearranged the stitches as I went around to adapt it to the 2x2 rib pattern. So it basically, because the tubular 1x1 rib cast on, you've got like a knit stitch purl, knit purl, cast on stitch. So I would knit one, but then I would take the purl stitch off, like hold it, and then like on a needle or whatever, and then knit the next one, put the purl stitch back on, purl 2. I don't even think I did like holding it with a cable needle. I think I just held it in my hand. So, and it turned out fine. They're nice and stretchy. And that's one of the big reasons why I prefer cuff down socks, honestly, is you can, I don't know, I haven't found a bind off that I really like for toe up socks, but I do really love the tubular cast on. It's stretchy, and I think the key is that it doesn't take any more effort really than a long tail cast on, which is my go-to cast on for most other projects. I know there are good bind offs for stretchy knitting or for ribbing, but they take a lot longer. Like I've done the Elizabeth Zimmerman sewn bind off. I did a pair of fingerless gloves one time and they had 2x2 rib at the top, and so I did the sewn bind off, but it just takes so much longer. So I just really like doing cuff down socks. That could also be because I like doing a gusset, like a standard heel and gusset, standard heel and flap, gusset, there we go. And I have yet to master doing that toe up. I've also yet to try. But I know I can do this. I don't need to look at any pattern or anything to do the dropped heel. And I did accelerate the decreases for the toe. When I'm making socks for myself, I will just do the standard decrease 4 stitches every other round. It's easy. It's what I learned when I first started knitting socks. But for hers, I did that for a couple of rounds, but then I just did decreases every single round to make a smaller toe, because she's 7. Her feet are not the same size as mine. And for the heel, I did not make it as long as I would for adult socks. I still had the same amount of stitches. This was the 56 stitch sock. And so I still did the heel flap on half of those stitches. And normally 56 stitches, half of that is 28. So I would do 28 stitches and 28 rows. I don't remember. I think I might have just done maybe, I don't know, maybe 22 or 24 rows. And they fit her really well. So those are my 7-year-old socks. And this is what I mean when I don't really like to do just plain vanilla socks. I love Mina's New York Sock Club collection, which I think I won in a giveaway. But the patterns are all really nice because they're pretty mindless. But, so it's almost like knitting a vanilla sock, and it's still really easy to adapt what kind of ribbing you like, what kind of heel, what kind of toe. But she provides instructions for different sizes, and it's just really detailed instructions with a cool stitch pattern. And some of them would look good in, some of them look good in striping yarn, some of them I don't think I would really want in a striped yarn. But, I mean, all of them would look good in like a lightly speckled or a solid colored, color. So I highly recommend that collection. I've already knit a couple pairs from it, plus this pair, and I have another pair on the needles that I'll talk about in a minute. My FO that I'm probably the proudest of right now, because it's massive and brioche and amazing, is the Tiger Flower by Katrine Birkenhauser. It is so squishy. I love it so much. Oh my goodness. I have called this my More Springs shawl. Again, I'm on an Anne of Green Gables kick right now. This quote is from the book Anne of Avonlea, where Anne says, "That is one good thing about this world. There are always sure to be more springs," which is nice to remember when we keep getting snow. I love snow. I love Maine. But sometimes I want sunshine and warmth. We did get some in February. It was like a tease. So the yarn that I used was from On the Round, which is a Maine-based dyer named Rachel. And I picked this up, I think, in her Black Friday sale. This purple color is called A Nice Chianti. I don't know, I'm not a wine person, so I don't know how to say that. And then the gray is called Granite. And the gray has some beautiful speckles in it. Like it's mostly gray, but then there are some pops of like yellow and blue and purple that are just absolutely beautiful. And again, unblocked. I just finished this a couple days ago, and I absolutely love it. So this is the biggest brioche project I've ever done. I did knit, let's see if I can find it. The only other brioche I've ever done, the name of this pattern is escaping me. It's an Andrea Mowry pattern with a brioche design that's similar to the one on the shawl. But it's only in this one section. The rest of it is just garter stitch. And this, I loved working on this. And it was nice. It was a nice introduction because I got to learn a bunch of the decreases and increases and shaping in brioche, but it was not big. Because I think I would get bored with a brioche pattern that was just like straight lines, which is what it is on the bottom of the hat instead of ribbing. But I would get bored with a shawl that was just that. Maybe not. I haven't tried. But I wanted a challenge because, and this sort of became my, in the evening when I finally was home from work and class, and I wanted something that was engaging, but not something that was really hard. And I love to read, but sometimes when I have been sitting in class and reading textbooks and doing homework for like 7 hours straight, I don't want to read a book, even if it's a for fun book. And if I do, it tends to be an audiobook, so then I can work on something more complicated. Because I can knit simple projects while I read. So this was addicting, and it was the perfect evening knitting for me. And she includes instructions for a nice bind off that helps to go along with the shape of the pattern, nice and stretchy. And some of these sections don't look that great right now. Right here it kind of bubbles out, but once it's blocked, that will open up. And I just love this design. I have yet to master using brioche charts. Plus the charts for this were massive and you couldn't really look at the whole thing all at once. So I just printed out the row by row instructions and highlighted like the row number as I went along to help me keep track of where I was. So yes, I am completely in love with this shawl. And I like that it has this simple garter welt section, which can be mindless knitting, so that even when I wear it like this, you can still see a lot of the gorgeous brioche. Because in some shawls, if the cool details are only on the very edge, you can lose them when you wrap it up and wear it like that. So I loved this so much that I wanted to make a second one. Only this time, I am making this for my mom. Oh, but I did want to say, I had like hardly any yarn left of my main color. Like this is so little, my scale, I just have a kitchen scale, it won't even measure this. And then I have 7 grams left. So this was technically my main color, and then the gray was my contrast color. Which basically the only thing that's different between the main color and your contrast color is that your last couple of rows of ending the brioche and the bind off are done in the main color. That's really the biggest difference so far as using up the yarn. There is another difference I'm going to talk about with the second shawl. So this time I'm going for a more bright contrast. I had my mom, I pulled out a few options last night and she chose what colors. I am knitting this, what I'm using for my main color is Legacy Fiber Arts in their Steel Toes base, which is a 75-25 superwash merino and nylon, 463 yards to 100 grams. This gorgeous pale gray, sort of almost a lavender tone to it. And my contrast color is from Done Roving Yarns. I believe it's her Frolicking Feet base, if I'm interpreting the label correctly. The color is Robin Eggs. It's a 100% superwash merino, hand-painted yarn. It's a main-based dyer. 480 yards to about 4 ounces. And they just beautiful. I neglected to take a photo of the Done Roving blue yarns, but it's basically like a short section of navy, then a short section of this bright blue color. When I initially cast this on, I was using the blue as the main color, as I had done in my other shawl with the purple as the main color. But what the big difference between your main color and your contrast color, besides just what color you end up using to bind off, this is not straight garter stitch in this section. It's creating a garter welt where you use one color, you knit across, and then you slide the stitches back to the tip of the other needle and knit that row again in the same direction using your second color. It's like when you're knitting actual brioche where you go across in one color and then go back to the beginning and start again in your second color. So you're essentially knitting every row twice in brioche. And so you're kind of doing the same thing. You're creating garter welts instead of straight garter stitches. But with this yarn combination, that gray, there's a very high contrast between the blue yarn and the gray yarn, much higher than is in my purple and gray shawl. So in the purple and gray, let's see. So you can see in this garter welt how the gray is sort of, the gray bumps are right next to each other. And then the purple is in the V section, like that. Whereas in this shawl, it's the blue yarn that's next to each other and the gray is kind of in between. So the difference between the main color and the contrast color, which one you choose, depends on which color you want to stand out more. So in this, with the purple as my main color and the gray as my contrast color, the gray I actually find to me stands out more. Which is fine when the colors are close together like this, but I was finding that for my blue one, that it was so bright using the gray as my contrast color. The blue, you were completely losing the blue yarn. The gray was just totally overpowering, which is fine if I wanted a bright gray shawl, but I think my mom will be happier with one that's more muted and more blue. So I think I had gotten about this far. I looked at it and I didn't want that. So I just ripped it out and I started again and switched and used the gray as my main color and the blue as my contrast color. And I am much happier with how this is turning out. You can really see the different shades of blue with the bright blue and the navy. So when you look at this, you see the blue with the gray complementing rather than the bright gray with the blue just sort of complementing that. So if you want to knit this shawl, keep that in mind. Now, again, this is pre-blocking. I don't know how it will change once it is blocked, but that's basically what matters when you're choosing main color versus contrast color, is which color do you want to be more dominant in this garter section. Again, with the lower contrasting yarn, it doesn't matter quite so much, but with a high contrast, it really is a lot more important. But yeah, I just love this pattern so much. And I honestly haven't quite decided because my mom really loved this and loved the color, but so do I. So she may end up with this one once I'm done with this. I'm not sure. But normally she'll just kind of like comment on my knitting, like, oh yeah, that's pretty. But this time she commented on it multiple times, many times while I was knitting it. And just said that she really liked how it looked. So. And yeah, within the past couple of months, I have been doing more knitting for other people, and which is not something I've done a lot in the past year, 1 to 2 years. It's been really, I've been knitting more for myself because I realized I'm a knitter. I have nothing that I can actually wear that's for me. And it was a couple years of really exploring different kinds of yarn, a few different breeds, different yarn companies, yarn dyers, just learning how big this world of wool is. So yeah, so I really have been enjoying delving into that, but now I am getting back to a place. When I first started knitting, I basically only knit for other people. Whether or not those were well done projects is a different discussion, but I mostly knit for others. And so now I'm kind of getting back into that a little bit, now that I know how different yarns hold up and how they wash. Alright, what yarns are good for gift knitting. but without deadlines. If I knit with deadlines, I will not finish things. I will procrastinate on them. I stop wanting to knit it once it has a deadline and somebody's expecting it. So yeah, just kind of knitting. Hey, I finished these socks, kid. You want them? That's kind of my knitting style right now. I apologize. This is going to be a rather long episode. I have so much to go over. So I was talking about knitting a lot of projects from Mina Phillips' New York Sock Club collection. Well, I have another one that I'm working on. And this is her Union Square socks pattern from that collection. Beautiful pink and purple yarns. And I think right now I'm planning on giving these to my 12-year-old sister. I'm going to have her try it on. If the leg doesn't fit, then I'll make them for my 9-year-old sister and make her a different pair. She doesn't know I'm working on these yet, but. And I'm using Knit Pro Zings that I recently purchased from, it was actually Sarah of the Dabbling Shepherdess podcast who had a D-stash, and so I picked up a couple pairs of Knit Pro Zings, which I never used before, and I'm really enjoying them. At first it took me a while to get used to them because they're a little bit longer than the other DPNs that I have that I use for socks, but I really like them now that I'm used to how long they are. I like them. And the yarn I'm using was just some yarn that I had in my stash that I believe was gifted to me. It's from Wisdom Yarns, their Marathon Socks Phoenix. It's a 75-25 superwash wool nylon, 459 yards to 100 grams, in the colorway Hayden, which was their color 275. And this is similar to how West Yorkshire spinners will have solid colored stripes and sort of the patterned stripes. And this stitch pattern is kind of like a ribbed eyelet sort of pattern, which in the pattern photos Mina uses a self-striping yarn. And in the pattern she says that you can adjust the amount of plain rows that you knit between the eyelets to match up with a self-striping yarn, which I thought about doing, but I kind of did for the first couple, but then I realized that some of the stripes are different widths. Like you can see that this pink and white is a different width than like this light pink. So I gave up trying to match up where the eyelets fell based on the stripes. But just a fun, girly, happy colorway. Again, mostly vanilla, but a little bit of interest. And I'm about to do the short rows to make the bottom of the heel. Again, a normal heel flap and gusset. And I did the full, this is the 56 stitch pattern, so I did the full 28 stitches, 28 rows. Which means 14 slipped stitches. I don't count the actual rows, I just count the slipped stitches in the heel. Yeah, so that's my homework travel knitting right now. I also have on the needles, this is kind of slow going, but I am knitting a cardigan. I have dubbed this my Silver and Shadow cardigan from where else? An Anne of Green Gables quote, which says, from Anne saying, "Look at the sea, girls, all silver and shadow and vision of things not seen. We couldn't enjoy its loveliness any more if we had millions of dollars and ropes of diamonds." Which I just absolutely love. And I just love Anne. Anne's the best. The pattern is Georgetown by Hannah Fettig from her book Home and Away, which has some really beautiful, simple designs. Again, just knit to be really comfy, standard pieces. I'm really close to the sleeve cap shaping for the sleeves. And in that book, she includes directions for traditional knit in pieces and seamed sweaters, as well as seamless or mostly seamless. So I'm doing the knitting it in pieces version. And I'm using Cascade 220. I don't know what the colorway name is, but it is just this nice light gray color. This was some stash yarn I bought on sale a while ago. But I decided I already have my gray cabled pullover that I wear all the time. So I figured I would want a worsted weight cardigan. I don't really have any cardigans besides store-bought ones. And the one that I just finished. So I thought I would try having a worsted weight cardigan, which can kind of become, during the spring and fall, like a jacket. I can throw that on before it's cold enough to need a full coat. And again, I did my favorite tubular 1x1 rib cast on. And I'm knitting these, as you can see, 2 at a time. When it comes to sleeves, I like to knit, if I'm not knitting them in the round, like for this sweater, this is a colorwork yoke pattern, knit from the bottom up, but you knit the sleeves in the round. But I'm just knitting them standard in the flat, but 2 at a time. And a lot of sweater patterns just start with the body of the sweater, either the back or the front, but I like to knit the sleeves first, because I did swatch for this, but then I can kind of see how it's knitting up, and it just gives me a chance to explore with the yarn in a really easy way before I need to do any shaping or anything, or patterning if there's patterning on the body of the sweater. I think Claire from New Hampshire Knits was the first person I heard talk about knitting the sleeves first. In her case, she uses that as her gauge swatch, which is really good if you don't want to knit an actual gauge swatch. But I'm trying to slow down and explore the yarn a little bit before I cast on right away. So knitting a gauge swatch and blocking it and everything. I'm trying to be better at doing that. Yeah, not a lot to say about this. It's pretty plain vanilla. This is sort of my homework knitting when I'm at home. When I'm doing homework in the library at school between classes, I knit on a sock. But this is my at-home vanilla knitting. The last thing that I've worked on, which I worked on this a little bit a couple weeks ago, but I haven't worked on it a ton, is my Cozy Memories blanket. So the last square I worked on was this one, when I last showed you. So I knit this square and 2 more rows. I guess I have done a little bit, but it's been like a month and a half. So not a lot to say. Most of these are I received as generous gifts. They were unlabeled, so I can't really tell you what they all are. But they just some beautiful colors in here. So yeah, it's getting rather large. I can't even fit it in the frame. I'll fold it up so you can just kind of see how thick it is. It's getting so big. This was really, I knit so much of this when I was over Christmas break. I just curl up with it on the couch. So it's so fun. And doing a swap, if you have a scrappy blanket and you feel like you're getting kind of bored with it and you're not really working on it, it feels like it's not growing, I highly suggest doing some sort of swap to get new minis, because that makes it a lot more exciting, at least for me. Because then it's fun to play with putting the yarns next to each other, what's going to go where, what complements each other. So that kind of helps to reinvigorate the project, at least for me. Kind of makes me excited about it again. So yeah, that is my Cozy Memories blanket. Yeah. And I think I have finally talked about all the projects that I currently have on the needles and off the needles. I was going to talk about some sweater ideas that I'm rolling around in my head, but I think because this is already so incredibly long, I will wait. Hopefully once April comes around and we'll have more daylight hours, I'll be able to record, at least record in the month of April. Because it is hard, I get out of work or whatever, and then by the time I have time to record at, 3:30, it was dark. But now it's light in the afternoons and evenings again, which is nice. So I'll talk about my sweater plans in my next episode. Probably won't have made any progress on that. So, I guess I'll just wrap up with a list of a few quick things that are just making me happy right now. One of them is Moroccan mint tea. I recently discovered it, and it is delicious. I drink a lot of black tea. That's my normal, like, in the morning and throughout the day. I'll drink black tea. My favorite is English breakfast currently. But then in the evenings, I like to sit down with tea, but I don't really want something like black tea that has that much caffeine in it. And green tea in general is just really good for you. So I bought myself some Moroccan mint tea that's loose leaf, and I love it. It's so good. Put a little bit of honey in, which I don't like for a sweetener in all kinds of tea, but I really like it for green tea. Another thing I've been enjoying doing is curating playlists on Spotify. I did have some playlists, but I would find myself, I would start playing it, but then I would end up skipping songs. Or I would like look up one artist and listen to them for a while, but then if I forget what their name is, or I want to vary it up, I want to listen to music in a similar style to some of their songs, but not just, all of them. So, and then I was listening to an episode of an audio podcast that I love called The Simple Show with Tish Oxenrider. And she and one of her co-hosts were talking about, like, the listening to podcasts and music, what they like to listen to, as well as how they listen. And they were both talking about creating Spotify playlists for very specific moods and times. And so I just went crazy one day, a couple days ago, and just I have so many playlists on Spotify now. But it's really cool because then I can find exactly, I can find a playlist that goes with exactly how I'm feeling, which is really fun. And one last thing I've done this weekend, I made bread and I made soup because I was on break and I didn't have any homework to do on Saturdays, because normally I'll sit down for several hours on Saturdays and do homework, but I didn't have to. I made buttermilk honey bread from the Bread Bible by, Beth Hensperger. I got this used so it doesn't have the dust jacket. So many recipes, and I want to make all of them. All different kinds and types of recipes. I'm just kind of starting at the beginning and working my way very, very slowly through, starting out with some of the basic breads. So I made her buttermilk honey bread. And I also made some chicken pot pie soup. I'll include the links to that recipe. I just found it online. And it was delicious. And so I think that is everything. That was a lot. Hopefully I didn't overwhelm you with all the projects off the needles. But thank you so much if you've made it this far through. Thank you. Yeah, I just hope that wherever you are and whatever the weather is doing, that you are finding time to create, even if it is just a few minutes on a plain stockinette stitch project, or exploring new recipes, or anything like that. I just hope that you are finding time to be creative and make a little bit of time for yourself. So until I see you next time, happy creating and happy learning from your mistakes. Bye.